are officially now the superintendent of Montgomery County Public Schools.
Yes.
Hailing all the way from Orangeburg, South Carolina, to now the superintendent of Maryland's largest school district, the first woman to hold this position, the second person of color, which makes you the first Black woman to hold this position, being appointed in Black History Month. How do you feel?
Yes. Overwhelmed, thrilled, humbled. Those are the first words that come to me. I knew this day was coming. It wasn't until the board president read the resolution that it hit home for me, that I heard the words and they resonated with me deeply, just reflecting on the responsibility to so many families for their children, which is why I became immediately emotional as that resolution was read yesterday. So I am ready to roll my sleeves up, get started with the work, because I know so many of our students and families are depending on me and many others to do just that.
Okay. It has been a challenging 2 years academically for our students across the state of Maryland, especially in Montgomery County. I've attended a number of the virtual meetings that you all have had, and a number of issues are constantly being raised by students and parents alike and guardians alike. When it comes to education and COVID, how are we helping our students, and what's your plan as superintendent now to help our students bounce back academically after those challenging years?
Absolutely. Their well-being has to be front and center for that plan. Our students as well as our staff. They have been isolated from each other for a period of time, exactly almost a year, when we were first impacted by COVID-19. And then we brought everyone back in the fall for the first time. And that is when we were able to see some of the challenges, not only that they've experienced, but the lasting impact of many of those challenges that they've experienced during that period of isolation. And so in many ways, we've seen that conflicting with them being ready to learn, because there are other needs that need to be met first. And so that's really a big part of our plan moving forward, focusing on what is that well-being need and how do we get our students centered to be prepared to receive that learning that that is so critically important right now, especially, again, thinking about their separation for a year. There was learning disruption that occurred that has to be remedied. And so really focusing on their well-being, and then focusing on teaching and learning. And this is where COVID-19 and putting it in its operational space and is really important. We've done so many things. Random testing for students, the change in ventilation systems within our school system, wearing of masks. All of those things have been put in place so that we can have our students in school for in-person learning. This is a person-to-person profession. As an educator, you've got to be able to build the relationships and trust with students in order to be able to get them to trust you to take care of their education. And so being in person, in school, remains a priority, and so that means we have to make sure that the safety, and that's physical safety as well as mental health safety, is intact so that we can do that work.
At one point, you guys were averaging around like 900 to 1,000 staff members being out per day because of either close contact with COVID or having COVID. You've had some teachers who say that in-person learning isn't working right now because of the virus and the spread of it. We seem to be kind of leveling off with this latest variant. But what do you say to those parents, as a former teacher yourself, and to those teachers who just aren't comfortable being in the classroom or feel like it's not working right now?
Yes. So again, I have no other way to say this other than our students depend on that person-to-person interaction. When we engaged in virtual learning, we had to do that. And we had to do it for the period of time that we did it, almost a year. Now we're seeing all of the impact of what being in that situation caused. So I think it's important for us to remember why we came into this work that does really depend on that teacher-to-student relationship, that teacher-to-teacher relationship that helps teacher A become better because of the collaboration they do with teacher B. And that really does require being together. Now, there are some ways in which we've looked at our work in which virtual connection can happen, and it's appropriate. We have some students who are in our virtual academy who absolutely have thrived and continue to move forward with their learning in that way. But for the majority of our students, they really do depend on that in-person learning. And so for our staff, I want to continue to encourage them to look at all of the things that we've done to help keep everyone safe. investing in the mask, investing in our ventilation systems. All of that is to protect the interest of keeping everyone safe when they are in the buildings together.
Do you see the mask mandate going away anytime soon? I know Governor Hogan spoke about that yesterday, but do you see that going away in Montgomery County anytime soon?
Well, we will have much discussion with our local health officer, our Department of Health and Human Services, and our county leaders, because as we know, every jurisdiction in the state of Maryland is different, and we want to be able to take into consideration where we are as a community and how that fits into the next steps for our school system. So we will continue to have those conversations. The Maryland State Department of Education they've offered some off-ramp solutions to moving away from the mask mandate, but I think again we have to have that conversation here and say, what does this mean within our community in Montgomery County, and work with others to make that decision.
You talked about the disruption that COVID has kind of caused for students in their educational process. Another issue that some folks are bringing up is rezoning, and how students could be shifted to other schools because of the rezoning. And they feel like that's now another disruption to their students who have been through so much at such a young age, especially elementary age students. Do you think rezoning is the best option? Is there a way for maybe some students to be grandfathered into the schools that they're already attending versus having to switch them again during those formative years?
Mm-hmm. Very important conversation we're having right now, and I'll name two priorities that the district's had that I think really focuses on centering that priority. One is we continue to have boundary analysis for the purpose of thinking about how do we better utilize capacity within our schools. So we need to continue to do that and continue to say how do we not be disruptive to communities in a way that will be helpful to them at a time where cohesiveness is really important. But we also have to take into consideration there's been much mobility that have occurred in our schools and within our school system as a result of COVID-19. Some families have moved. There's been, transition for many different reasons. And so as we look at enrollment across our system, it's shifted in the past 2 years and in many ways very significant in many places. So we have to take all of that into consideration. What I am committed to doing is continuing to have that conversation with our communities and our families to hear them and hear their fears and concerns when we do make decisions about I make recommendations to the Board of Education about what's going to be best for having students transition to other schools for many reasons, and trying to solve whatever their fears and concerns are so that that doesn't become the basis of why they don't feel heard or have concerns that we really don't want them to worry about. There may be solutions that they're not aware of or solutions that we can come up with together.
Okay. Teacher shortages, bus driver shortages, substitute shortages is a nationwide problem, but it's impacting this district in particular. What are some incentives or recruiting measures that you all are using to attract people to this district and for the long haul, hopefully?
Yes. We started to have that conversation yesterday in one of our board presentations, and I was so thankful. We have become very creative about how we go about recruiting. One, we've designated recruiters in Montgomery County, and that is a unique practice in many school systems to have people who are dedicated to just doing recruitment work. But we've also redefined how we recruit. Now that we have the virtual option, it's just not about moving from location to location, but taking advantage of how many people we can actually interact with through the virtual environment. So we've been doing that and very excited about that. And in terms of thinking of how do we keep staff here in our school system and how do we recruit, it is truly about knowing what's important to people. Everyone's reevaluated life as a result of COVID-19, and I don't think that's a bad thing. It's a great time for us to ask a very pivotal and important question, which is, what's important to you? And how can we, as your employer, really take that into consideration in all of the benefits and the programs that we provide to you? For some, it may be time. And it's always really good to look at time and how efficient we are and how inefficient we are. For some, it may be, taking care of their social emotional wellness, and how do we as a school system provide those avenues for our staff and our students, and what does that look like? But particularly for our staff, because what mental support may look like for one staff member may be very different for another, but providing a menu of services so that it's differentiated. Those are the types of things that I believe are going to make people want to come and be employed in Montgomery County, and most importantly, stay employed in Montgomery County and to feel valued.
So we were talking about recruitment and stuff. So neighboring jurisdictions are offering certain incentives, financial incentives to recruit people. to come work for the district, be it in a bus driver position or a teacher position. And we, like I said, we've established that there's a need all across the nation. What does that look like here, though, in Montgomery County? Are there any special incentives to become a bus driver, which we know we need to get our students safely to and from school? Are there any financial incentives to become a teacher? Because that's also a huge issue, is teacher pay.
Right.
Teachers feel like they just don't make enough money for the work that they do.
Absolutely. So this year we've partnered with our association organizations to really focus on those very areas. We've done some very creative incentives this year, like for instance our retention incentives. You know, our employees who came on board and have maintained in the role, we were able to incentivize them, and that was something that we had not done in the past. For our bus drivers, we are working with our association to continue to come to the best agreement around how do we determine what's best for our bus drivers, because we found that sometimes it is monetary, and in many cases it is, but it goes beyond that. And it goes back to the conversation we had earlier, asking the question, what is important to you, and what will make you not only come and work in Montgomery County, but what will help you stay? We've learned from many of our employees, and we saw this with our bus drivers, that many of them are interested in pathways that lead to other opportunities for them to professionally grow. And our bus drivers represent the perfect example of that, because oftentimes they run routes in the morning and then they have this time in the middle of the day before they then have to fulfill transportation responsibilities in the afternoon. Well, we need them and we need them in our schools doing other things to support our students. And so we are so thrilled about our pathway program that we've been working on for the past few years, and it's actually one of the investments that we have in our budget this year to really build on that. So it comes down to really asking that question and engaging our staff in what's important to you, and building out, and some are immediate incentives and some are just long-term focus areas that we build out.
This academic school year was the first year that high schools didn't start the year with SROs in schools. Unfortunately, we had the incident at Magruder High School where a student brought a ghost gun to school. I spoke with students who were there, who were terrified during that. Do you think not having SROs in schools is the best option for Montgomery County students?
So the SRO program, there were benefits to it and there were drawbacks. As any program within our school system, we had that program for many years. I believe it was in existence when I first came to the system, or early on in my career. And what we found is that the program worked in many ways, but in many ways it did not work, and it did not work for certain groups of students. And our school system is oftentimes a microcosm of a lot of what's happening around the world. What we've learned is that there has to be an intentional effort to really build a relationship with police officers and students, and so that those relationships that they see occur negative online and in other places, it does impact them. And then the question lies with them of what does this look like in the places that are supposed to represent safety and security for us as students. And our schools should represent those spaces. And in evaluation of that program, we recognize that in some ways that didn't work in the way that we wanted it to work for everyone. And some of it had to do with the program, some of it had to do with things that were happening around the world. So we started this year with the CEO program, the community engagement officers, and we will continue to evaluate that program. Last night we presented to the Board of Education some adjustments that we are making to that program after having much collaboration with our students and our community members, parents, organization leaders, so that we can continue to shape and form that program to be exactly what it needs to be for our students and right now moving forward. So
what are some of those changes?
Some of the changes were really having the opportunity for the CEOs to be able to connect more frequently with the principals. Another big component of the change in the program is being intentional about how those CEOs are building relationships in establishment of programs with our students in a very proactive manner, like the DARE program. And starting with our students, not just interacting with them to manage environments in the secondary schools, but establishing that relationship at elementary, middle, and high. And we found success in the school system in having that interaction, that involvement through those programs. And another pivotal point that we shared last night that is going to be really important to really focus on is when we're looking at a situation and a student need, when there is a team of professionals, and when I say team, I'm talking the CEO, the social worker, the counselor, the school security officer, the PPW, people personnel worker, when they're sitting down together, and that's this well-being team, and they're having discussions about how do we need to handle this particular situation, who takes the lead and why, then it doesn't become an isolated event where one person is making the judgment or the call about what needs to happen. But when you have a collective IQ together who are all bringing their expertise to that conversation, then I think we all walk away with more confidence in we've made the right decision for this student, and who takes the lead, and who needs to provide what support to the child, and then maybe to the family. So that's what we're most looking forward to in the model, and how we utilize the CEO model, so that it's not one that's working independently, but in collaboration with many other support positions within the school system.
Do you see a possibility for SROs to make a return back to Montgomery County high schools?
The program itself, I don't see that exact same program coming back. I don't, because it doesn't exist right now. I do see us making the commitment to continuing to figure out what does the right program look like for the students in Montgomery County in every school right now, and being very flexible and thoughtful and intentional about what are the components of that program and what it should look like, and continuing that conversation to evaluate. And using our data to really speak to, is it working or not? And for whom is it working and who is it not working for, is a very important part of that discussion, because that then should lead to the adjustments, if any.
Do you think that there's, when having this conversation about safety in schools, talk a little bit about how factors outside of the school can play a role into the safety inside of the school?
Oh, it's an important question that everyone needs to ask, because Montgomery County Public Schools is one part of our community. When I think about all of the issues that we're facing now, mental health challenges, the ghost guns, our community's had a lot of conversation about that. The school system cannot solve those problems alone. It has to be a collective conversation, and I'm grateful that in Montgomery County we have county leaders who are committed to that discussion and saying, what are we going to do as a community to address ghost guns not being available to our students? What are we doing to strike the balance with families who do decide to have a weapon in their home, but making sure those weapons are tucked away and safe, and not end up in the hands of our students? And so there, just given those examples, you see the responsibility of legislators, and how they have to make sure that's put into writing. And what is the responsibility of our parents? What's the responsibility of all community leaders to say, what do we need to do to solve this problem to keep our children safe? And when we all do that together, we're ultimately going to have safer schools, because everyone's owning the problem and working towards solving it.
This area is somewhat of a transient area, not the entire county, but people are moving in and out of this area, in this region, because we have federal workers who come and go and things like that. People have been talking about test scores, pre-COVID and in COVID. Do you think that there is a concern when it comes to test scores that our students are performing well?
So we can't deny there's been great impact since COVID-19. Our children who have had to learn virtually for over a year, it is not the same level of instruction. Here locally, we've taken our assessments into deep consideration, and we've seen significant changes as a result of what's happened over the past year. But here's what I can tell you. I believe in the expertise that our teachers and our staff have in this school system to address all of those needs. When I think about the mitigating learning disruption plan that our staff came together and said that we're going to work on, we invited our community members because we wanted to use research-based practices that really focus on how do you close those gaps for students who need research-based strategies that says this speaks to this particular student's need. And we've taken all of that into consideration, and we're planning for that and implementing those specific strategies to help our students. And for those who are thriving and have continued to excel, what do we do to further excel them? So it's not an either or. It is about differentiating the learning needs for every single individual student within our school system. And that is what we are committed to doing in Montgomery County Public Schools. So when I champion the role and the focus and the vision of mitigating learning disruption as a result of COVID-19, that is exactly what I mean. And to me, that is not optional. That is a necessity for us. And that's why having all of these pieces around operational needs to make sure COVID-19 needs are managed is very important, because our students must be college, career, and community ready. And that has to be the center of our focus.
If there were 3 things that you had to focus on as a new superintendent of this district, even though you've been in the interim spot for a while now, what are your 3 main focuses if you had to choose 3?
Absolutely. The first is rebuilding trust within our community. With the many different opinions, the impact of COVID-19, the stress, the instability, it's caused our community in so many ways to be very focused in a very individual way. Everything about a school system is that you have to think about your neighbor and what do they need and how do you help each other and how do you lean on each other. So rebuilding that trust and rebuilding that on behalf of the school system with our entire community, considering all the disruption, absolutely is the first priority. The second is making sure that we are taking care of the well-being of our students and staff. So their mental support systems and structures are in place to address that, as well as the physical well-being. We've already started to make many of the investments in that, and we will continue to do so. And the third is focusing on that teaching and learning piece to ensure that our students are college, career, and community ready.
Lastly, to all the little girls out there, be them black, white, brown, whatever color they are, you're a role model for them, being the first woman to hold this position. What do you say to little girls out there who might feel like they can't do certain things or who may feel uninspired to take on challenges? You being a woman in this position, what do you say to them?
I say to them, always start with yourself and believe in yourself, and never let anyone else determine what you can and should do. Knowing yourself and knowing your true potential, power, and strength is what everyone, every young woman, girl has to know. And we all have them. We just have to dig deep and figure out what they are. And determining who and where can I see the role models who are going to be able to not just serve as role models for me, but to help to mentor me to become who and what I want to be. And so the first thing I'll say is, let me be that mentor. I enjoy pouring into others, as I've had many do that for me over the years. And so I look forward to mentoring the next young woman who wants to be a superintendent here in Montgomery County Public Schools or anywhere else. Call me. I'm happy to share the journey and the support that's going to be helpful.
Anything else you'd like to add that folks need to know about you as the new superintendent of Montgomery County Public Schools?
This is an incredible opportunity, and I'm just thrilled to serve. I come to this position in so many different roles: as a mother, as a wife, as a daughter, as a friend, as a sister. And as I think about what decisions are going to be really important for every student in the school system, for every staff member in the school system, I have all of those perspectives to work from. And I lean into those perspectives and those experiences to make the best decisions that I can, along with the support of many others. And so I do look forward to using those lenses across the board in my work as superintendent here in Montgomery County Public Schools.
Forgive me for not knowing, are your children school-aged children?
Yes.
Attend Montgomery County, I assume attending Montgomery County?
Actually, no, my son does not attend Montgomery County Public Schools. I live in Prince George's County Public Schools, yes.
Okay. Gotta move you across the border.
Right. We're moving across the border.
Montgomery County is expensive though. So yes, alrighty.
And interesting enough, that's why I started my career here in Maryland, in Montgomery County, and could not afford to live here, which is why I did not live in Montgomery County. And, you know, once your life just kind of starts and you get settled, and I'm a creature of habit, you know, that's how it ended up. But it makes me even more passionate about figuring that problem out, because there is a benefit to living in the community that you serve in. And just, I spoke earlier about life and thinking about what's important in time. So if your commute is much longer than it needs to be and you're thinking about saving time, being able to afford to work where you live, where you work, being able to afford to live where you work makes a difference with time. And so I am thrilled about us having all of these conversations that I've had an opportunity to live through as an employee growing up in the system, but to adjust and make better for our future employees.